And so entry-level work right now, like professional services, type of work, entry-level work right now is going to be the first thing that's like really, 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 really in trouble. Things like that are very clear indicators that AI is going to have way more disruption on the labor market than even what we've seen over the past couple of years. And it's going to disrupt, I think, a lot of people who thought they had a lot of security. It is going to be uneasy and folks are going to feel queasy in their stomachs. But I also think that there's a potential to unlock a new entrepreneurial renaissance, within this country.
Welcome to the AI CEO podcast, where the future of business is built today. I'm Seema&x, founder of Virgin AI, growth strategist, co-chair of DC Startup and Tech Week, and your host. In this podcast, I sit down with CEOs, industry experts, founders, and investors to tackle the big pressing questions on your mind about AI. No hype, no jargon, just insights you need to stay ahead. Now let's dive in. The AI CEO podcast is brought to you by Vergent AI, helping mid-sized businesses accelerate AI adoption safely. Ready to lead with AI? Visit vergent.ai to learn more. Welcome to today's episode of the AI CEO podcast. My name is Seema&x, and I am your host. And as always, I am so excited to have my guest on today, Chandler Malone. Chandler, I am so grateful for you to be on. He's the CEO of BootUp Studios. I feel like I've known you from Web3, from EdTech, from AI. We're going to have an incredible conversation about the future of AI and entrepreneurship today. And you came all the way from Miami to come talk to me on this podcast. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Seema. I'm so excited for the conversation.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I do want people to know who you are and give creds around that. But I'm going to start off with a little bit of a provocative question, because I think part of our theme, and we talked about entrepreneurship, is changing by the day because of the power of artificial intelligence. You and I both know that.
Yep.
And by the end of this pod, so will my entire community know about you. But it's 2025. I'm 22 years old. Yeah. No credibility. I have a laptop. And I do have drive. What was my most unfair advantage I can create for myself because of AI now?
Yeah. I think you can build your entire online presence for yourself. And you talk about not having credibility, right? That social proof, that online presence is how you build the credibility. Today, right, you can put the camera up, your camera phone, not even like a special camera. Put the camera up on a handstand or a stand and record yourself talking about whatever it is that you're passionate about, whatever it is that you care about, whatever it is the thing that you know a little bit more than everyone else about, and be able to put that into highly curated content across the internet to be able to start, developing credibility for yourself. I think also once you've started developing credibility for yourself, it's a lot easier to build a community for yourself, right? You don't have to code to be able to build a website, to be able to take in people's contact information. You don't have to code to be able to host, a community platform on, Discord or Slack, or some of these other channels. And so, I think right now for, a young person, you look at all the technology tools that are out there and they give you the ability to do the things around credibility and do the things around distribution that I think used to be so expensive and so time consuming for a young person or someone just getting started, to be able to do.
I love that. I think, again, we are in an age where you and I just chatted about vibe coding a little bit when we were drinking a little coffee before this podcast, and all sort of these AI tools that have been popping up that, to your point, it's what used to take so long when you're having a concept of an idea to get to execution can happen. And I don't like saying with the click of a button, but somewhat in a different way today. So let's get into sort of your story, because I'd love for this community here. I love your sort of founder journey that started at 19. And how you've kind of always kind of played at this edge of technology, education, and access, I would say. So maybe just share a few minutes about.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. I think for me, the first thing I want to say for everyone here, I think we're talking about AI, right? I want to let everyone know I do not know how to code. I have never known how to code. I have never learned how to code. Things are more accessible just in this world and in this life, I think, sometimes than we give them credit for. So that first business that I started at 19, events, parties, concerts, right? Very in-person, non-tech, business. But the way that we built and grew that business was all through technology tools, right? We built, the website on Squarespace. We built the Facebook page, didn't tell everybody that it was us, and so when they saw, over 1,000, followers on the Facebook page and, hosting about the first event, that gave us the credibility, right? The social proof. We use tools like MailChimp, to send out, invitations. We use tools like Eventbrite, to help us with ticketing, right? To where we had never hosted an event. We didn't own a venue, but we were able to go get this business off the ground. Like really, when you start thinking about what all the tools cost, it was maybe $200. 10 years later, that business is still around. It's changed hands a few times. Has brought Billboard top 10 artists to St. Louis, like the Chainsmokers. Follow on, executives within that business have gone on, to start venture-backed companies, as well. And so that was kind of like the first, company that I started.
And I love that. I just want to just share, like, I always ask the entrepreneurial story early on, like when you got that itch and what that looked like. But the fact that you're like, look, there were so many tools then just to help support you with reach, distribution, credibility. And now in the world of AI, and I know you're going to get into it in a few minutes, but it's like, it's almost mind blowing. But I think part of the problem for a lot of entrepreneurs is they don't know what they don't know, right? So keep going.
One thing I do want to also just highlight about like that, opportunity is, I talk about all the technology tools that we use. But I had such a strong business partner, in that business. And I think that for all of the technology tools that we have, there is still just like a piece of going into battle with someone who is like equally, yoked with you, has the same level of ambition, same level of drive, desiring the same level of outcomes. And I think that increases your likelihood of success like exponentially. It's not like I have one more person, so it's going to double my likelihood of success. Like I think it's way more than a 2x. And so basically from there, started kind of getting the software technology bug. And so spent some time at a venture capital fund in St. Louis called iSelect Fund. Really want to thank Carter Williams and the team for giving me that opportunity there. I was interning there 20 hours a week. That was my first introduction to AI. We did a seed stage deal into a company called Benson Hill Biosciences. Benson Hill Biosciences SPAC during that whole, post-COVID, SPAC craze. But basically they were building AI for farmers. Right? To optimize.
AI for farmers.
For farmers.
Okay, let's go into what that meant or what that means.
Yeah. I mean, like they were building AI tools to help farmers at scale optimize their yield. And so you think about what that means for us, right? That means that we are getting more and better food at a lower price, right? And so, I'm starting to see a little bit, about, okay, what does AI do?
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is what, 2015, 2016. And so the tools and infrastructure that's available today was not available then. And so the actual access of being able to build with it, right? It was not the same.
So how can you probe a little bit on how and what they were using AI for? Like, was it a data analysis, predictive models? What were they doing? Because this is way before the hype. But again, AI and ML have been around like 75 years, right? And but this is a real business that you got access to or exposure to earlier in your career, which is amazing.
I wish I could go like super deep, on everything with Benson Hill. That was like literally one of the first deals I saw like 10 years ago. And so exactly how they're leveraging AI, I don't want to,
you don't want the trade secrets like you can't share.
but I will say, like, you go look at Benson Hill Biosciences, right? This is a publicly traded company that was started in the 2010s. Right. That was like leveraging AI within ag tech. Right. Like at this point, I'm like ag tech. But again, right, it's like you start to understand technology isn't just to be used in technology. Technology is meant to be used across all areas of our lives. And so I think even for folks who are looking to build AI businesses, I think finding areas where people are a little bit slower to technology. And I think that was a big lesson from Benson Hill. And then finding ways to integrate technology in those areas that are a little bit slower and resistant to adopting it, you're going to have a huge opportunity, for success. And so from there, I went and launched my first software company, event ticketing platform, right? The first business I started was in the events space. Did it on a mobile application, had some social tools, leveraged trends like, text message open rates versus email open rates, to help kind of like facilitate and streamline that service for event hosts. Ended up building that company to over 80,000 users, hosted over 500 paid events on the platform before selling it in 2019. One thing I will say there, when you have something good going, it's really hard to know when to let go. Post-COVID, there were a few companies in the event ticketing space, in the social event ticketing space, think Luma, think Posh, think Partyful, that have raised, 8 figures in capital. And, there's definitely a piece of me that's like, kind of wish that I had held on to things, for longer because there was so much opportunity in the space. But also it was my first time working with engineers, and as a non-technical person, as I shared, right, there was so much learning from just managing a team of 6 people, understanding like what the languages meant, the difference between the front end and the back end, the significance of testing, right? Like all these things that like you just have no way of knowing unless you just get your hands dirty. And then so from there, spent some time working in venture in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The fund that I was at did LP fund-to-fund investments, but also direct investments. And I think like that was just like such a fruitful, experience for me. It's like I got access to some of these fund managers who I looked up to, and was like watching their YouTube videos and like reading their blog posts. And, honestly, we're kind of like heroes, in my mind. And I was getting access to them without needing anything from them, right? It's like I had something for them. And so, in terms of just me being able to have a certain type of conversation, right, with like a barrier or guard down for me to be able to learn and get more information, that was such, a rich experience. But also, within Oklahoma, our thesis was trying to build a tech ecosystem in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is very oil and gas oriented. And so there were not a lot of software engineers. So the first two investments that we made in the fund were into boot camps. One was a coding boot camp called Holberton School. One was like a tech sales and customer success boot camp called Satellite. That's what got me into the boot camp space, right? It's like I spent a full quarter just doing so much research on the space. I see it's growing over 100% year over year, every year for like the past 4 or 5 years. I see college enrollment, declining every year for the past, 11, 12 years. I see specifically within the tech sector, this growing gap, of talent. I'm like, this is what an opportunity looks like.
Yeah, it was so clear for you and you had the experience going into it. So then I know you shifted into EdTech. Is that right? Is that when it happened? And I guess my question is, how do you leave venture to then restart your own startup?
But so, it's like I'm getting all these insights, right, on what is future of work. How are we training people for these future jobs? And so like literally that job, it was basically me just doing research on what I needed to do to start the company. And so, one just kind of, little tidbit that I'll share there. I want to give a huge shout out to the Tinto Capital team for supporting me, through this. And then I had an individual in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His name's Mark Lamont. He went on to go be a founder, but he was doing customer success for me while I was working at the fund, and, paying him, an hourly fee. He did a great job taking notes, sharing everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, And we actually had to kind of change course a little bit, based on, some of that feedback that we got. But, when I saw there's just so much opportunity in the market, I'm like, I have to go do it. And so, when it came time to, go raise capital, right? It's like, I already had the data points from all these customer conversations. I wasn't just like, oh, hey, give me money. It was like, no, I know that this is going to grow this quickly. I already have relationships with this many people in the space. If I go get the money to go build the thing, this is exactly what's going to happen.
Can I give you a secret? So I say this all the time, like when we in Virgin, like we do a lot of work in terms of services, right? The services arms and talking to CEOs and founders on this podcast, right? Like I'm talking to individuals who've been in AI or experts in it. I always say all of this is market research, right? Because without talking to people, you really don't understand not only the problem, but where the opportunity lies in terms of timing right now. And that's kind of what you saw through those insights.
Fully. And I mean, like, I think a lot of times, even when you talk about just talking to people, right? A lot of people identify a really good problem, but they struggle to build the right solution because they're not asking the right questions. Right. Like that, like customer discovery process is one of the least glamorous parts of the journey, but one of the most important parts of the journey. And I think even like, I mean, I know the mom test, and I feel like that's just like such a talked about book. But like when I say that customer discovery, portion is so important, like you have to be asking questions in a way not to get confirmation, but to be unveiling insights. And so, that piece is just so huge. And so raised a small pre-seed for the company.
What was the company?
Company was BootUp. And so basically educational marketplace, help people find, the right non-traditional tech training programs for them, offered a CRM to the boot camps to manage, the candidates that came through us, and then also did some job placement on the back end with some Fortune 500 companies that we had employment agreements with. And so, built that company, helped over 3,000 people get tech jobs for over $250 million in annualized salaries. Top companies they ended up at were companies like JP Morgan Chase, Best Buy, Dell Technologies, Home Depot. But I mean, like there was so much learning in that. Like I remember, when we closed Dell. And I've been, kind of starting to share this content. Right. When we closed Dell, we had a repository of all these bootcamp graduates, but we hadn't finished building out our software yet. So literally we just had a landing page with Wix and then a backend on Airtable with like all of the characteristics of these people like parsed out. And so when we closed that first enterprise contract with Dell, like we didn't have a functioning product.
This is like the true entrepreneurial journey. But part of it is that you need to sell first anyway, right? See if there's
Yep.
interest, sell first, and then build it,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
And that's what you did. But I don't know if people understand the nuance of that you were creating courses specific to specific roles in these enterprises, right?
So we were not creating courses.
Okay.
We were partnering with the boot camps who would create courses.
Got it.
And so, this isn't, about any specific boot camp, but, a boot camp that's focused on software engineering, right? Their marketing is going to tell everyone to go sign up for the software engineering boot camp.
Yeah.
You might be a UX UI designer. You might be better in tech sales or customer success. You might be a PM, right? You might be better in cybersecurity. There are boot camps for all of these different roles, but each boot camp is just trying to fill seats. Where we would come in is we would help you find the best boot camp for you, the best career path for you. And the boot camps would pay us a success fee basically for lead gen. And so that was kind of the business model on the boot camp side.
Got it. And then I know you got into test prep and then but I want to go into that piece of it and then how you kind of pivoted back into AI.
Yeah. I think like the test prep pieces, right, it really came from the same place, just like in my heart that, the workforce development, and the non-traditional tech training, places came from. I think one thing that's always just mattered to me a ton is like I've had a ton of opportunity my entire life, a ton of access and, skills to be able to make things happen. And so I feel like it's like my duty to be able to try to be helpful to others, with that. And that's where like a lot of the workforce, and education stuff kind of comes in. I will say, right, with the boot camps, right, everyone knows what happened to the hiring market in tech. We can talk about all the reasons why, right? Interest rate environment change. Companies can't get access to free capital. What were they doing with that free capital that they had access to? They were overhiring. Basically creating like a false demand.
What years are you talking about?
I'd say honestly, like up until 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think the interest rate environment was one thing that changed things. And I think the other thing was, when Elon, purchased Twitter, and made it X, right? He let go of 75% of the team.
He did.
And the app didn't go down, right? You think about what all these other CEOs are looking at. They're like, oh, wait, we just got a green flag to be able to cut our workforces significantly. And like, it's not impacting revenue. So now all of a sudden our company is significantly more profitable. Stock prices are going to go up. Like literally, this is what our investors want.
You actually added revenue streams by if you wanted to be with the check mark, right? It's like $10 a month or whatever it is now. Like, you know, so he was adding revenue streams while cutting costs of employees, but somehow, some way still running operations.
Yeah.
And obviously some of that is automation and other things that I know he's brought into X, I would say.
Yeah. But it's like, those two things, right?
Yeah.
Him and the interest rate environments, that basically flipped the tech hiring landscape on its head almost overnight, And so it went from people not being able to get hired fast enough to people not being able to get let go of fast enough. And, you start thinking about who's the first to go and who's the last to get called back. It's always the people who are the least experienced. And, the folks that we were helping train, by getting into the boot camps, right? Those were the folks who had the least, experience.
Yeah.
That kind of like forced me to be like, okay, helping people just go get into tech is a noble cause. But I feel like there's something like much bigger, like much more foundational that needs to be done because like the economy and the labor market can change on its head, in a day. And I think that trend though of, college enrollment declining, that trend of, there being some of these really high upside, opportunities career-wise that maybe don't follow the same traditional education path. You still have to show your knowledge in some sort of standardized credential and some sort of standardized testing at any point in life, whether you go the traditional route or the non-traditional route.
Right.
And so I think, those generative AI tools, right, that, came out in 2023, right? Like that made being able to go build like really personalized, really unique tools to the individual to help them prepare for these standardized tests, help them prepare for these standardized exams that have a huge impact on what their earning potential is going to be like. And it made us able to do it in a really like cost-effective way,
Well, let's take a pause.
Yeah.
Because that was a lot, right?
Yeah.
When I listen to your history, you were a purebred entrepreneur. You're looking at, those moments in time where you're like, here's the problem, here's what we're going to do to solve it, go after it and go, right? But then now you're at a place, and I'm very curious, like when the generative AI side came out, right?
Yeah.
This is, I think, September of 2022, when all the stuff started coming out. What was because you're a non-technical founder,
Yeah.
as you shared, right? Like, what was your acknowledgement of like understanding that power of that technology to get to a level of personalization for, say, prep, for the test prep business? Like, because part of this podcast is just to educate people about what is the technology
Yeah.
and how can you actually innovate with it
Yeah.
and automate with it. So like, I want to kind of step back because I know you're like in it. And I'm
Yep.
like,
Yeah. So I think the first thing I'll say is that like the non-technical piece is actually so important. I feel like for folks to like understand. Like I'm a big reader and I'm really big on putting myself in community with people who know the things that I'm trying to learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have to know how to plug everything up, myself to be able to understand, okay, this technology allows us to do this thing at scale that we were not able to do at scale anymore. Okay, this technology is able to, take data points and then begin to respond to them and basically predict what the best next action would be. And so then when you start thinking about like personalization, right? What is education all about? Education is all about personalization. The more affluent people become, the more tutors, the more private and smaller the class sizes, right? That like they put, their students in. AI is actually giving folks the ability to have this level of personalization at scale. And so for me, that's what got me so excited. And I think, in terms of like how you actually work with it, I'm not going to go super deep at an engineering level, but these large language model companies, think OpenAI, think Anthropic, think, Meta with Llama, think DeepSeek, right? Like all of these companies, they basically allow you to go have the strongest AI that will cost you $1 billion to go build as your backend, right? Maybe I won't go in like any like too specific use cases, but if you've got a specific use case and you've got some information or some data that is unique to that specific use case, then you can go fine tune these foundational models in a local environment for your specific use case. And so now all of a sudden you have the power of $1 billion worth of AI research, but localized to what you're building and specifically focused on whatever problem you're trying to solve. And so you don't have to hire 1,000 AI engineers. You probably need one really good backend engineer who can feed, these data points into the large language model for you. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So how do founders or CEOs like educate themselves on what can this technology do, right? Like so that they can unlock how you unlocked it. So there are a couple of things I agree. Personalization and precision is what this next phase of AI is going to make possible, right? And I think education in general hasn't been personalized. So you saw an opportunity like using these tools because that's where it's going. Like, and here's that moment in time where the more specific we can get to the unique skills, traits, education levels, whatever for an individual, then your outcome will be different. If the way that, I don't know, they test prep or your test prep process works for them, they're going to get better results, right? That's the goal, right? So, but how do we get educated? Like, where do you go? Like, what's your tool set for that?
Yeah, I'm really big on X and Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's like a tech lane that's very either crypto or AI focused, depending on like what your interest is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like there's a lot of just like noise, right? Like there are a lot of people saying that you can do things that you can't do right now and, this, that, and the third. But because I've been able to spend, some time in the space, like my filter for noise, I think is like pretty strong. And then I like really try to index hard, on personal relationships. And I think like if you look at like who my like just real genuine friends in life are, and even like over the past like 10 years of my life, I would say they like almost over index, for really strong, engineers, both in, the AI, and the Web3 side. And so it's like, I'm just putting myself like fully, like literally taking my body and placing it like in the flow of information,
That's what I wanted to hear, if I'm being honest, right? Because I think there's where people may say, hey, I don't know what I don't know, but we're in a time and place. You just need to immerse yourself. It could be part of a community that's talking about AI in business. It could be online, so much access. I mean, let's just go back to the internet, but if you want to learn, there's a lot of free things. And then there's obviously tons of programs and boot camps and other things. But I mean, I think what we both are trying to say is that you have to learn right now.
Yeah.
You have to learn this stuff because that's what the future of business and entrepreneurship is going to look like. So what in your mind are some of the non-negotiables for, say, the next generation of founders as we're thinking about this, power of AI, and it's only going to get stronger from here?
Yeah, I think number one is curiosity, right? When information is just flowing so quickly and things are changing, so fast, the people who are going to be able to win are the people who are just genuinely curious and interested. Like, oh, this new thing came out. Like, I want to know about it. Not like, man, this new thing came out. Got to stay up to date. Like, so like that curiosity, I think is a really big piece. I think also just as like these AI tools continue to get stronger, I think people's reading skills and written communication skills are going to increase just in terms of, significance, right? If all these computational things are able to be done better, faster, at more scale than they've ever been able to do, then like what's most important is just being able to understand what's going on and being able to communicate, your vision to either yourself or to, these machines.
Yeah.
And so I think like curiosity, reading and reading comprehension and communication skills. I think those are like the biggest things. And I think, obviously you got to have the drive, the ambition, the motivation, the desire, all those things. But I think like you could live a way easier life than going to be an entrepreneur if you don't have, those things. And so I think those are kind of like non-starters.
I love it. So, I mean, we are in a place where I think for some entrepreneurs who are immersing themselves, it's like that gold rush time, right? It's like, oh, okay, now I know AI is big. Here I've learned about ChatGPT. I know about the back end of the playground, and I'm going to create a ChatGPT wrapper as a business versus something that's a little bit more thoughtful. Can you kind of speak to what is a wrapper of a business, and are those viable, and or what's a real business leveraging AI that actually solves a real business problem?
Yeah. So I have a really hot take here, and I feel like I've gotten a little bit in trouble for it some. But I actually
I like
think,
that.
yeah, I actually think that there's huge opportunity in the wrappers. And I mean, I can't go into all of the companies
Can
and
you
opportunities.
explain what a wrapper is so
Yeah.
people, yeah.
So, right, I talked about these, foundational large language models, right? Anthropic, OpenAI, Llama, DeepSeek, et cetera,
Yeah.
right? What a wrapper is basically just building a front end like website on top of, one of these large language models, not providing, any kind of like proprietary data to fine tune it. You're basically just slapping, some makeup and lipstick, what I'm saying, on top of the LLM and saying, hey, it's here for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, if you are solving a problem, your wrapper will need to be to evolve. But like the wrapper as an MVP for an AI product for someone who doesn't have AI skills is actually like one of the biggest things and like one of the biggest opportunities I feel like for folks who want to build software businesses.
Can you give an example what a wrapper could be?
Man, I've got a few, but they're like very specific to companies that are out. And so
Yeah.
I don't want to, kind of like talk about what people have going on and then folks go try to
Sure,
duplicate
replicate
what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
But I mean, let's just use like a kind of low hanging fruit one. Like, let's say, you're looking for, a mobile therapist.
Yeah.
Right? You could build a website that has, hey, I'm Chandler, your mobile therapist. I'm trained in this, and this. And then when you talk to it, you could basically be talking directly to ChatGPT
Yeah.
and not anything special, not anything differentiated. And so for the wrappers, right, they allow you to build something real that has AI like baked into it all the way from the jump. And so there's a great opportunity there. But on the flip side, right, anybody can go build that. And so, let's say you launch a wrapper. And I would recommend, honestly, if people want to like build an AI application, the first version be a wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got the insight that people like it. Now is when you need to start adding, more to it. And so I think that like the wrappers as publicly traded companies, no, but like a wrapper to go raise a pre-seed, and like build out your team and, all those types of things. I think like that's probably the best, most efficient, way to do it.
And just to give you guys some context in terms of the community, I mean, if you go in the back end of some of these, I call it OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
they have something called a playground, right? And you could literally prompt it by telling it, hey, literally what you said. I don't know if it was a therapist, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Hey, I'm a therapist. I'm this type of therapist. Here's all this context around like guardrails and things like they shouldn't be talking about. You can add like, I don't know, scripts and research reports and all the things on the back end. And then when someone's asking a question to this wrapper,
Yep.
they're getting real insights, but the back end is the large language model. Like, and it's just being in a small way fine-tuned.
Exactly.
Like in a small way. So what you're saying is you can use that almost like rapid prototyping and, to test your actual concept And then you can go much deeper once you actually have traction. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think even right where you talk about, like the prompting on the back end, and I talked about just like written communication, right? That's where if you have really strong written communication skills and really strong prompting skills, what you can do with a rapper can be exponentially more than what the next person could do, with a rapper. And so that's why I like specifically speak to those skills and not coding or, other things, because I feel like, again, like the computational things, like we're not going to be able to compute better than a computer.
Okay.
I guess, yeah.
I hear you. So your take is use it for rapper prototyping, testing, and then, so what is a good use case for a more intentional, an actual, call it AI, or a business that is enabled by using AI technology that solves a real business problem that is viable in the marketplace?
I see. And so you're saying basically not a rapper.
Not a rapper.
I see. I see. I think
rapper.
like, we talk back to Benson Hill, right? Like literally there's any sector of society, there is going to be an opportunity for there to be some sort of prediction engine, some sort of personalization engine, like some sort of output that is taking the data points and making a prediction, basically. On the other side, though, I will say, I don't really think you need to hire an AI engineer in today's world to go do that. And I think, we talk about, leveraging these large language models. You can do it in a way that's not just, a rapper, right? And I think that's where you need, a strong backend engineer, right? That can like actually manipulate and build versus you just be prompting, And I think, we even have this conversation of like, are we going to have like 1-person companies, 2-person companies? And, we talk about the ease of building, right? But you can't build anything deep or technical without someone who has a level of technical expertise, right? And so
I was going to push back on you a little bit there, only because I agree with you fully that you can use like Lovable or Replit or all these tools that are out in the market to, prompt your way into creating a tool, a product, right? But if you're serious about it, I mean, there's a genuine need for like user experience testing and privacy and integration with AWS. I mean, these are real things that when you're actually creating something that's real and more substantive outside, and it goes back to your point of like test the market, and then you're going to need AI engineers. You're going to need people who understand Bedrock, which is like AWS's infrastructure, or Microsoft's Azure. Like these are real tools that, you need experts to build.
Yep, definitely. And I think that goes to the piece, right, of like, there's never going to be this 1-person company, right? You're going to have the person who's a subject matter expert in their area, and they're going to be leveraging a team of agents basically to go, do what they're supposed to do. I even talked about, kind of some of the signal things, right? Like on X and Twitter and, some of the things not being true. People talk about vibe coding, right? Your lovables, your replets, your cursors, and all the things that you can do with them. They're so powerful to validate. But if you're going to build anything that is original and differentiated, I haven't seen a single cursor, lovable, replit thing that's like more than like a landing page or simple, application. And so I think that like there is this barrier that's gone down, but also, right, when things get easier, you've got to do more to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I have a whole framework on that, but we'll talk about it in a second. I'm going to go into vibe coding for a second. I know I brought up the tools, you brought up the tools. People may not know what they are and what the concept of this like almost communal movement that is going on around vibe coding with technical people and non-technical people.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe give your perspective, I'll give you mine.
Yeah, I've got a friend right now who's building a company fully with AI. He's recording the content himself, but like every piece has been, AI native. And it's like the page that he's created, that shares more about what they're doing and, intakes, people's information, to add them, to their subscribers list and to their community. That was 100% fully vibe coded. Right. And he is building a very real business.
And vibe coding means?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, So the vibe coding pieces, right, are originally you had to go into the terminal and, use, we'll just say JavaScript to, write the entire application. Yeah. The one thing also that I will say is before we had JavaScript, it was all ones and zeros. Each language, each coding language is getting us one abstraction maybe closer to our human language, to talking to the computers. And so basically what vibe coding is allowing you to start using your natural language to describe to the computer what you want it to build for you. Obviously, as a non-technical person, there are limitations with that. Like, as a non-technical person, there are things about database management that you will just never know.
Yes.
Because you haven't done it before. And so, I think in terms of like what can be built, I think it's really hard, especially for a non-technical person, to go build something that's like super differentiated.
Mm-hmm.
From the vibe coding perspectives, I think that someone who is technical can do exponentially more with the same tools. But then I think at the same time, when you start trying to build something that is like enterprise level, enterprise grade, that, is serving, hundreds, thousands of customers, I think the vibe coding tools are really best for prototyping than they are for being like the thing and like the meat and potatoes that you're going.
So I have a question because, okay, just for context for the community, I mean, literally you can put in certain prompts. I need to create a website. This is the type of information, X, Y, and Z. It needs to have these sort of applications, et cetera, including a CRM form. And so then you click a button and all of a sudden in Lovable or Replit or one of these tools, you start to see all this code come up. Yeah. And, again, going back to your point, if you're non-technical, you're like, that's cool. And then you could hit like, preview, and you see it and you're like, okay. But like, you're not going to be able to manipulate that code to make it better. You can always prompt the manipulation. Yeah. But that's kind of where I just had Jank Sidar on my pod last week. And he's the CEO of Enquire AI. Our whole theme was like, is expertise going to be dead because AI is getting stronger? And in that particular situation, and you absolutely shared it, was like, you're not going to know how to differentiate or make it better if you are not an expert in this particular type of code. But if you are somebody who understands coding, or say it was JavaScript, whatever it was for that moment, for that, prototype, you're going to be able to go back and like, oh, I would do this better. I would do this better, and actually read through and understand it. Yeah. Right. And I think, and obviously to deploy and commercialize is a whole other different thing. Right. Yeah. So
I will say that there are some tools, one I'm going to gatekeep, just because our team is small. But there's a company that recently came out of YC called Polymet.
Okay.
And so Polymet is another one of these vibe coding platforms. But what they'll do is they will deliver the source code to you. And so like for our engineers, like they like using Polymet because they can do things quickly, but then still go back and like manipulate versus like not knowing what's going on in the black box.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry, that was like a little bit, kind of a tangent.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. I mean, look, we've chatted a little bit about this sort of next age of founders have access to tools that have never been imagined before, that they can get from zero to prototype much faster, right?
Yeah.
That area of like testing and insights happens. That's still the same process. I mean, I think there are AI processes to help bring that to life and make that faster, but you still need to be solving a real business problem.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Right.
I don't like AI is not going to be the thing that finds the problem or solves it for you. It's going to be the tool that helps you to do it at scale.
Well, one day, I mean, you could also ask it, like, what are the biggest problems? Go scrape the internet. But I hear you. That's what I'm saying, right? But it's like, it's hard, like entrepreneurship, I think, in the world that we're living in, as the technology gets stronger and we see the economy with jobs, there are all these jobs that are going to be lost, new jobs are going to be coming. I think that World Economic Forum, the jobs report, I think it was like 72 million, 92 million, like more jobs are going to be created, but different, right? But as I know, I'm a little like probably extra from the most people because I'm on like these future of humanity, future of AI, like councils and stuff like that, where I'm like, man, like things are shifting really, really fast. So I think entrepreneurship is going to become a thing more and more because people are going to have to figure out how to make money in a different way.
Yeah.
This is the first technology that blue collar and white collar folks are being attacked, and so I'd love to get any of your perspectives on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, like this is, I think, one of the things that I feel the most strongly about. When we were working, in terms of trying to get people, jobs in tech, right? I saw the labor market flip. And that was not because of AI, right? That was because of those reasons that we talked about previously.
Yeah.
Right now, the average American is reading at a 6th grade level. These foundational large language models are putting out content at higher than a 6th grade level. And so entry level work right now for service, for like professional services, type of work. Entry level work right now is going to be the first thing that's like really, 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 really in trouble. I've shared just some of the angel, investing things that I do. So I love, keeping up with what's coming out of Y Combinator. You go on the Y Combinator job board right now, they've got multiple job listings that say humans need not apply, only for agents. And, they're for specific things like, data mining, scraping, et cetera, things that like an agent could do better.
I know that's crazy and people are like, what the hell? But I could have loved that. That's like
Yeah.
humans not needed. So they're big, but that's also an interesting thing for an entrepreneur because they're like, do you have an agent that's going to solve this problem? Put them and go apply here.
And I'll pay you.
And I'll pay you for it.
Yep.
Wow.
And I don't have to pay benefits.
Yeah.
They're working 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's a marketplace.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I like that insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that like, things like that are very clear indicators that AI is going to have way more disruption on the labor market than even what we've seen over the past couple of years. And it's going to disrupt, I think, a lot of people who thought they had a lot of security.
Yeah.
It's going to disrupt a lot of people who I think were some of our highest earners, in society. I think a lot of those folks are going to be really looking in the mirror like, okay, what's next? And I think that's where, AI's ability to give the individual more agency is really exciting. Because like while companies, have a duty to, their shareholders, and if they can do things more efficiently, then like they're supposed to get rid of you, you also now are stronger and more powerful than you've ever been. And so you can go build and do things with a way higher degree of confidence, way faster, costing way less money, right? Using some of these tools where maybe you know how to code, maybe you don't know how to code, but you're still being able to validate your problem. You're still being able, to get, a customer base or like build a community. And so I think like a lot of these folks who are in these professional roles, they know what like really high production level quality work looks like. They know the amount of work that they need to put in, to be successful. And so I'm honestly really excited for this period when the labor market changes is going to be uncertain for a lot of folks. And, it is going to be uneasy and folks are going to feel queasy in their stomachs. But I also think that there's a potential to unlock a new entrepreneurial renaissance, within this country, as well.
Yeah, I feel a major sense of responsibility. When I learned a couple of years ago how powerful this technology is going to be, how I always say it's bigger than the advent of the internet, which means that completely the way that we do business is fundamentally going to change. And so like, that's why I actually think with DC Startup and Tech Week this year in October, it's our 10th year, we're going to see the biggest crowds this year because of all the economic shifts, because of all the layoffs. So people are going to want to learn, how do I start these businesses? And then if they can, going back to the education side, so that's a great way to educate yourself too. But like, I love like the Googles and all the things that are online. There are communities like this, but I love what you said. I want to bring it back, like, to inspire yourself of what's possible. Go to the things like the Y Combinator and see the cohorts that have graduated. Go to Techstars and see the companies that are, again, graduating from those cohorts because they're working on big problems. And I've seen 8 out of 10 of the tech companies are definitely AI first companies, or at least they may be rappers in some capacity.
Yeah.
But some of them are very intentional.
Yeah.
And they're disrupting markets like you've never seen. And I think there's so much with traditional business processes alone that can be disrupted.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I again, don't want to, share too much, but, I know a person who's, leveraging one of the foundational models to basically replace the admin roles for some of like the major CRM companies that are so large that they're admin roles, for those things. And it's like, obviously don't feel great about, the job loss for people, but it's like this person learned how to do this thing in their job. And then now they're a subject matter expert at it. And they just went and leveraged the tools that were available to be able to go build a potentially massive business.
Yeah.
And I think that like that is opportunity for everyone, right now. Everyone's kind of like a little area of expertise and like genius is a little bit different. But the thing that I would recommend for folks is not to go try to build the thing that sounds like the coolest or the sexiest, but go try to build the thing that's either like your calling that's on your heart or within your zone of expertise and genius, because that's where you'll be able to have like the additional insights that like the AI maybe has all of these data sets that have been out for all of history, but you have a little bit of nuance because you're in the field talking to people every day.
So, I started this podcast asking you about what a 22-year-old with no experience, how would they like focus on a business with this AI era? what you just shared is, hey, listen, you're a seasoned professional. You have subject matter expertise in the industry that you've been part of for X amount of time. You know some of the challenges that are already in your industry. So you can identify and prioritize what you care about most. And then again, what's probably the biggest opportunity in terms of, addressable market, all the normal things, right? But then it's talking about how do you enable it using technologies like AI, right?
Yep.
Because I think fundamentally that will never change. You need to focus on it. And when you're the SME, that is also where you have unique perspectives in the marketplace and you can build credibility and thought leadership faster.
Yep. And I
Right.
mean, I think that's why even like, and if we talked about this before, but right, things like this, like things like going and like creating like lanes and angles and avenues for content
Mhm.
are so important because you can know everything. It does not matter if the world does not know that you
Mhm.
know. And so, I think even, earlier in my journey, sometimes I would hesitate to do things like this because, sometimes in the venture community, they'd be like, oh, you're doing too much content, you're doing too many podcasts. But at the end of the day, it's like you need to create some sort of signal. You need to create some sort of credibility for yourself. And we go back to that young person, right? You don't have a decade of professional
No.
experience to point to. And so you being able to just share your ideas, your thoughts, your knowledge, but also like the public forum on the internet is bigger than any public forum. I just want to say like these things are so, so, so important for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs.
I want to go into your expertise around education for a second
Yeah.
because it was interesting. Maybe it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago. It was career day at my fifth grade. I have a fifth grader and a 10th grader. So I went into her classroom and I had 25 minutes to talk about my company and AI. And I was like, I don't want to talk to them. Like, I mean, I want to show them, like,
Yeah.
I want them to be immersed in what's possible. So I did this like exercise where I was like, all right, guys, give me a couple prompts for a story. So they gave me, I think I shared this in a previous podcast, but it was like Kendrick Lamar, a pickle and something, right? And then anyway, I put in ChatGPT, came up with a little story frame. Then I was like, all right, Len, let's prompt it for a picture with the same story frame. We did that in seconds, right?
Yeah.
And then like, okay, well, we're going to put this, we're going to put in Runway ML, and you're going to see how this video comes to life, right?
Yeah.
And so like the whole storyboard started coming to life, and there's parents in the room and teachers in the room, and they're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then I was like, all right, now we're going to, create a Carter Rock Cubs anthem for the year. Give me the names of your teachers, experiences that you've had this year, like student names, and we're going to create a little, well, what genre you guys want? They're like rap or whatever, right? So we created a little song via ChatGPT and we put it in Suno. And then used Suno, and within 3 minutes, I mean, it was like a freaking, like a rager. Like everyone was getting up and dancing, And it was like, but it was, I think there's this like education, it's not easy to always penetrate.
Yeah.
Right? Like the educational marketplace, right?
Yeah.
We know how fast things are moving. And yeah, these are like fun tools, right? But there's so many more tools that are very applicable to learning, to your point, to SME knowledge, augmentation type of stuff with agents. What do you believe is the best way, I would tell you, from like the elementary to high school and college levels, any perspective, like how do you take this edge technology that's not edge anymore in a sense, right? We know where the future is going. And I know a lot of people working on this. This is not a small topic, but since you've had a lot of your career in the EdTech space, I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah. I mean, so I have such a soft spot for reading and writing for so many reasons. I think even like that was something that my mom emphasized so much for me and just kind of put me ahead in life in so many ways. But I notice even in the people that I talk to, who's like reading a lot and who's not, because of their ability to just hold the thread of, a more complex thought or a more complex conversation for longer. And I think for the younger students, not just because of the AI tools that can get them the answers more quickly, but also because of the social platforms that just move more quickly, right? Being able to not just like comprehend, but being able to just like hold attention in a certain place for an extended period of time, I think is going to be a huge differentiator for the younger folks. Like, and it's kind of scary to say that like being able to hold attention for a long period of time is going to be a differentiator, but for them, it definitely will be.
So how do you negate that with all these tools making everything faster and kids are on social, like just, doom scrolling all day long. So we're adults, but I always say innovation has implications. So you're right.
Yeah.
But how do we control and monitor that as new tooling is going to make things faster, easier, more convenient in education and otherwise?
Yeah. And so I'll say that this feels, I don't know what the term is. Like I'm preaching from somewhere I shouldn't be preaching from because I don't have, any kids yet. But I think that, like as a parent, the technology is so powerful, but understanding that it's a tool, right? And not the answer, not the solution. And so, you go teach, your children how to use a particular type of tool, right? You teach them how to tie their shoes, but they're not spending all their time tying their shoes, And so I think that's how the technology really needs to be leveraged. Like it can't be the thing that is taking care of and like looking after, the kids, or else like their attention spans are going to be fried.
Mhm.
But it can be the thing that's helping them figure out how to uncover their agency in life,
Mm.
And again, that's just like a very different type of interaction and type of way that, you're empowering like your young person to use things. I think you start talking about, some of these like small business owners, reading is your best friend. And I think also, like now, just because of the world that we live in with social, there's a lot of really good video content.
Yeah.
I've got two folks that I would recommend, folks check out. One is a really good friend of mine. His name's Callum Johnson. He's got an entrepreneurship podcast. Talks about a lot of different topics within entrepreneurship that I think like anyone, would be able to learn from.
Because
But-
entrepreneurs are janitors and chiefs, and then we do a lot of things.
Exactly, But at the same time, he also focuses on AI a
Okay.
lot,
Mhm.
and has a lot of folks who have built businesses in AI or doing things in AI,
Mhm.
and talks a little bit less about the technical aspects of the AI and just about how you can like implement these things into your business.
Yeah.
So I think that's one place where I think business owners should look. There's another, oh man, his last name is Eisenberg. So he's really big on Twitter, and then he's got a podcast that he puts out weekly, and then a newsletter as well.
Okay.
And then with the newsletter, he shares a lot of AI tools that you can use for specific things within your business. And you don't have to go find the things on your own.
Yeah.
It's finding the people who are doing that work, for you.
Yeah, I agree. So with education, I think we both agree that personalization and precision is going to be the wave of the future.
Yeah,
How do we get there?
yeah, man, that's a really tough question.
I know.
I think just large systems in general are really difficult, to manage and to optimize. And our public schooling system, this is just like one of the largest systems in the world. Like, the majority of our young people are a part of it. And so, I think going through that pathway, I actually think is going to be more difficult.
Mhm.
I think having the country have a collective consciousness about things and things being integrated into people's lives at home, quite frankly, is probably going to be a more effective solution than, us trying to go through
All the bureaucracy of the
yeah.
school board systems and the counties and the
Yeah.
states. And
I'll share, just like a small anecdote that we were talking about, in my time with Path, the AI test prep company, we were able to go get our product into a high school. We went from demo to wire in 7 days. Like,
which is not normal.
yeah, that's like incredibly fast, right?
Yeah.
Because like they saw the value in the product immediately. And so they were ready to act on it. And then it's like,
But they were private.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And then we go to the public school systems and they're like, oh, there's a 12-month procurement process.
Right.
You've got to do this, and this. And you may not get it at the end. And now it's like, okay, what about your juniors right now who need it?
Right.
Like they need it now. And so I think those types of just like experiences that I've had in the education system make me not the most confident that like the actual public schooling system is how we're going to be able to like be effective. And it's going to be more on parents.
So let's use your experience with career pathing here, right? Because as a parent who's in the know and understands the realities of job losses, where the new potential jobs are headed, and then you have kids that are going through the current normal curriculum, there's going to be a time frame where that's just going to continue to happen, right? What do we need to do to supplement the education for our children today?
Yeah. That's where I think the reading and writing pieces are so huge.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not saying like forget about everything else, but it's like, I know for me, I was good at math. I never had an issue with like the written problems, because my reading was so far ahead that like, I'm not having to really expend much mental energy on this. And so like, I want to just like hammer that point home. I know I've said it probably like 10 times,
Mhm.
on this, but that's so significant. And then I think being intentional with putting the main, like largest tools, in your young people's hands
Mhm.
so that they're familiar with it, so they understand how to manipulate it, and not just saying like, oh, hey, go play with this. But I mean, like my mom used to be like, oh, read this book and then write me, a couple pages of what happened from the book, right?
Mhm.
Okay, I want you to go play with this large language model, but I want you to bring me back something from this large language model. Bring me back a deliverable, whether it's a report on something, whether it's, a graphic, whether it's, a short piece, whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is a really great point to pause on, right? Because that means the parent has to be educated,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think again, like they're probably, I mean, again, unless you're in tech or really trying to even go deeper personally, there's still tons of education that's needed on that level. But I mean, someone like myself, because I'm in the know, like I anywhere I can, I bring one of my kids with me, and I'm like, all right, well, even though your school is saying no, I need you to know what this is. I need you to know what Perplexity is and why that's better than Google. Because the way Perplexity researches things is, it's just the back end of it is just so different. And like I had Angela Virtue on the pod. She is a professor at American University and like kind of running their part of their leading team of how they're going to be using AI in all
Mhm.
their curriculum. And, we went back and forth a lot on like, how do you, and they're being very proactive. I think it's different on a collegiate level than it is.
Oh, for sure.
There's just more agency for them to be able to incorporate things faster. And even though, I mean, and faster is depending on the school's focus on it, but Americans doing a great job. Some of our local schools are doing a better job than I've seen through
Yeah.
other education systems.
I think at the higher ed, right, in that like post-secondary space, I
Yeah.
think you're always going to see those things happen faster because like the outcome is very labor market focused.
Hmm.
And it's like when you see the labor market like adopting these tools and it like having impact on them, like that's like literally the job,
Hmm.
of the institution, is to prepare you for that.
Yeah.
And, we can have all these philosophical debates about, the quest for knowledge or like job readiness. But when you're paying that money for your young person to go there, you're paying for them to be prepared for the world. And so I think that's part of the reason why we see the higher ed institutions like accepting and adopting faster. And I think the other thing just with the school system, I want to just give like a huge like shout out and like thank you and just like level of like respect, for all the individuals who are actually like working within the system.
Yeah.
But I think the way that, we incentivize people makes it really difficult for that specific system to be optimized. I had a lot of friends of mine back in Dallas who right after college graduated and they were teachers, and it was very specific for them that they wanted to be teachers in Dallas and, be a Black male in a classroom with a bunch of young Black males. But they also had things that they want to do for themselves and start their own families that like had economic implications,
Hmm.
right? And so just the way that our education system is set up, even the incentive structure to get strong talent to be training our young people, I think is not just really set up for it to be best, which is why I think it will fall back to the parents.
So supplement.
Yeah.
Reading and writing is fundamental. Get them engaged in the tools. And as a parent, we need to be educated first because there is a sense of responsibility. I think one of the core aspects is like you have to learn from all these tech cycles in the past, right? Like there's implications with social media, and we see it on our children today, right? There were implications with the internet and other things. And I think we just have to be more aware this round.
Yeah.
And then I want to bring it back to the founder side for a second. Innovation has implications,
Yeah.
right? And there is the need for understanding responsible AI, a responsibility within what you're curating and creating.
Yeah.
Every idea is not always a good idea. What do they do for that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big catch-22 of leveraging,
Yeah.
the foundational models is that, you don't know every engineer that's there.
Yeah.
You don't know almost really anything that was like baked into the models. And so, I think that that's where like, the trust and safety pieces like matter so much. And I think you even look at just people's perception of some of these foundational model companies. And I think that's the thing that like Anthropic's really been, I think pushing hard, outside of just the performance of their models is that, hey, OpenAI might come out with something, DeepSeek might come out with something, but like our trust and our safety safeguards
Yeah.
are so much higher than these other folks. So if this is something that you care about, you're going to use Anthropic, versus using OpenAI or versus using DeepSeek.
And this goes back to educating yourselves and understanding the models and what that even means, right?
Yeah.
And like sort of their own, it's kind of like their own level of culture that instills trust, right? Like their value systems.
Yeah.
So research the models that you're actually going to use for your product or your solution, right?
Yep.
And understand, make sure that they have those interventions, guardrails included.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm like, God, I can talk about so many different angles still, but I'm going to ask, in the world of AI tools, like I
Yeah.
believe that now, everyone used to talk about your marketing tech stack, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, what's your AI enabled tech stack, right? Because every my what I would say is, like, in the future, all businesses are going to be intelligent. That's going to be a baseline, and
Yep.
there's a different sort of strategy to be competitive, including data and your brand and automation and all those things. But what do you think is your version of AI enabled tech stack? Like, what's the hottest underrated tools today?
Yeah. I think from just like a content creation side, I feel like we talked about, Opus Clips and Icon.
Mm-hmm.
I think, people are talking a lot about the agentic workflows, but I think the people that are actually like gaining value from them is a much smaller, demographic and percentage. Oh, man. Manus. Yeah. So Manus,
How
I
do you
think,
feel about Manus? Can you explain
Yeah.
what it is? It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Oh man, so many things to talk about in terms of, how we feel.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think DeepSeek very much, kind of like shocked like the US market, when it came to the world and was free, for everyone. And basically what DeepSeek was a competitor to, a lot of these large language model companies that, we mentioned earlier.
That is based out of
Manus.
China, which put a pause on certain people because they didn't know where the data was going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why it was free
Yeah.
for everyone,
Mhm.
like you're the product,
Yes. Exactly.
And so, Manus is basically the same thing, but from an agentic workflow
Yes.
perspective. And so like OpenAI has their OpenAI operator, right? That's what Manus is. And so, I think like that tool is so strong, so strong. I also will say, man, this is a hot take on the data stuff. There's very little data protection going on,
Yeah.
as is anyway. And I would say that people have eyes on your data that you think is secure, and have had eyes on it for much longer.
Yeah.
But there are just so many geopolitical things that would happen, if things went down in a certain type of way. And I'll say, even just to kind of take a step back, my
Yeah.
first venture role was at a cybersecurity focused fund.
Uh-huh.
Part of my role was to write updates to the LPs weekly about attacks that were going on.
Mm.
Like, in the United States alone, there are ransomware attacks that are hitting hospitals, like city governments, schools every single week. It's just not happening in New York City or in DC or in Miami, so you're not hearing about it. But, a town with, 78,000 people, and bam, their hospital's out and they've got to go pay, 10 Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and it's like, this is actually like life or death for people.
Yeah.
Are you going to pay the 10 Bitcoin to get the power back on?
Yeah.
And so like, I think to that piece, like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to use the Chinese products. And I would say that I definitely like applaud that from just an awareness, perspective. But I actually think that in general, like your data is a lot less secure than like what you actually
Well, I mean,
think.
I think let's just anchor it to things that, like, as you're talking and having conversations with friends, all of a sudden you see an ad talking about, hey, I want to go to Malta. And then you're like, you see a Malta tourism ad and you're like,
Yeah.
well, like they've been listening for a long time, legally or not. I'm always curious when a lot of these large language models have this temporary chat, like, where they're like, oh, this is never going to be trained. Obviously, I always say this, and I'll keep reiterating, always go into your settings and your privacy settings and take away, like click on the button that says do not train my data into the bigger model. But even with this temporary chats that they have is like, all right, we're not going to, I think in 30 days, anything that you put here won't come and it won't show up in your history.
Yeah.
You think that's real?
Yeah. No.
No.
Not at all. Not at
It's
all.
all going to come out, guys. It's all going to come out.
Oh,
I mean,
for
it's just,
sure.
yeah, like, because why wouldn't they keep the data?
And I mean, again, like when these things become large, they are businesses, they are entities, they are not humans. In this country, by law, it is your fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. If you can make more money, or if you can make the same amount of money and save money, by law as a company, you should do that.
Yeah.
And so, if you're getting information as a company and there's a way for you to monetize it, I think as an individual consumer, you're foolish for thinking that those companies are not actively looking for every way to monetize.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to a founder opportunity in that too, right? It's like, to your point, there's a fiduciary responsibility to optimize shareholder value, which means automation, productivity and efficiency,
Yep.
reimagining workforce or like processes to, save time and money. Well, all those things, which are all opportunities for entrepreneurs, right?
Exactly.
It comes full circle.
Yeah. And I mean, like I'll say, like, even in terms of like what, we decided to go build out, with our agentic workflows, that was really the whole thought process.
So let's get into that,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
I want to close you out with a couple rapid questions. So BootUp has shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've been down the event space, you've been down the sort of career pathing and EdTech space.
Yeah.
And you've now had multiple different iterations of companies and businesses. And I know you have a big passion for entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah.
BootUp Studios now is a venture studio, and you have built out a agentic workflow to help support anyone who comes through your cohort, right? And tell me if this is right or wrong, right? To help them with from idea to execution, not only through the support that you'd be giving them through SMEs and other things, but through these agentic tools.
Correct.
Because I always say entrepreneurs are like janitor in chief, so you're doing so many different things. So maybe, did I say that right? Explain what it is. And I know you're just launching this, so it's exciting.
Yeah. So we've built this fully agentic workflow to be a co-pilot for entrepreneurs, right? Take you from, ideation to execution.
Mm-hmm.
So you can interact with the agent, in 3 different ways, right? You can basically have the agent just automate tasks for you. You can have the agent ask you for permission before carrying out a task. So, you think about, sending out an email or a certain type of copy, you want to get your eyes on that to finalize it before it goes out. And then the last way that you can interact with the agent is the agent can actually prompt you to take an action, right? For certain things like, I don't want us to be hooked into your bank account and, something go wrong and, that be on us. And so, being able to have the agents there to prompt you to take actions, especially when the information is a little bit more sensitive and private, I think is really strong. And so you've really got this like co-pilot in your pocket. It's like, hey, do this right now. Or, oh, hey, I'm taking care of this for you. And then the way that we've laid it out is across really like 4 functional areas of the company. 1 is operations. 2 is go to market, which is both marketing and sales.
Mm-hmm.
3 is finances and fundraising. And then 4 is product. And so like we've got a number of tools, we've got a number of integrations. I think the lowest hanging fruit, example is, you get something that comes through your terminal and maybe you want to respond to somebody and set up a calendar invite. You just say, hey, respond to this person and set up a calendar invite. And you don't have to go into your G Suite to go do it, right? The agent's already hooked into your G Suite, can take the command and then go do it for you. And so that's just one kind of like low hanging fruit.
That's
like
the beauty of agentic workflows. It's what I live and breathe, so I love it. So what's your hope and goal with this new launch of this type of cohort, which is a different sort of venture studio, right?
So I think, my thing is we talked about these things in the labor market, right? A lot of people, I think, specifically in technology, specifically in financial services, specifically in business services, are going to see a little bit of a reckoning, in the labor market. But also I really believe in, that demographic of people's resilience, their talent, their aptitude, their work ethic, all of those things. And I think those people can be great entrepreneurs. I think though, when I talk to, a lot of my friends who are in these roles and who are some of the smartest, brightest, most competent, hardest working people that I know, a lot of times the thing that's stopping them isn't their competency, isn't their work ethic. It's just feeling a little bit afraid to go about it alone. And so that's what we really built, this co-pilot for. Now, we recently launched an accelerator program to work with 5 companies while using the co-pilot. And really the purpose of the accelerator program is twofold. 1, all 5 of the companies leaving the accelerator with cash in hand in the form of investment capital and or customer revenue. But also I want to be able to tell the stories, of these people. I want folks to be able to see, the 5, entrepreneurs, leveraging the agent to go build their businesses and say, yeah, I work at Microsoft, or yeah, I work at Meta, or, I have a similar job as this person. The things that they were scared about are the same things that I'm scared about. I know a lot about my niche thing. Wait, they just made it through this, cohort and, raised some money and, quit their job and started going full time. I see myself. I can go do that as well. And so that's really like the goal, for this accelerator that we're launching, in conjunction, with the agentic workflow that we built out.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're exposing people to AI tooling, you're exposing people to obviously resources and subject matter expertise. So it's a different sort of boot camp, a different sort of accelerator. Any thesis, like who should be applying?
Yeah. I'm looking for folks who are working professionals, either in technology and academia. I think there's a huge opportunity in academia. I mean, PhDs have a level of subject matter expertise that almost no other demographic of society has. And you pair that level of elite subject matter expertise with these AI tools, right? Like you have something very powerful.
Yes.
So I think folks working in technology, folks working in academia, folks working in financial services, folks who are in professional roles right now, but are looking for more and looking to take the next step, that's who it's really for. When I think about, just like
So first-time founders.
Yeah, definitely
Okay.
first time.
Okay.
And when I think about, just kind of like industries and sectors, I'm more industry agnostic and more around the technologies, right? And I think like AI and blockchain are like the two technologies that are just going to allow us to do so much more, going forward in the future. And so that's really the spaces that I'm looking for people, to be building in.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions and
Yeah.
then close it out with one question.
Cool.
You ready?
Yep.
A business idea you wish, and I'm going to read these because I have them written out so I don't mess these up. But what's a business idea you wish someone would steal and build today?
Ooh. Man, that's a good one. What's something that's giving me a big headache right
That's
now?
exactly. That's what it is. That's what it's all about. What's your biggest pain point right now?
Yeah.
Is it in medicine? Is it in
Yeah,
education?
I think it's just like organizing social life with work life. You want to spend time, with friends. You want to spend time with, family and significant other. And, you also want to be giving all of, the time to, what you're building for yourself in life.
Yeah.
I think a tool that could help you like optimize how you're spending time and outreach and all of those things for what your goals are. And even for some of the feedback that you're getting from these people in your life, I think that could be an interesting tool for
Okay.
folks.
Most overhyped startup trend in tech?
I think announcing the really big fundraisers. That does not mean that you solved a customer problem, or it doesn't mean that you haven't solved, a customer problem. I look at, Path, like we never announced our fundraise and we didn't have a hard time getting in front of people. You build something real that solves a problem for people. People don't need to see that you raise $100 million to talk to you. They're going to be like, oh, this person's solving my problem. I'm interested. I'll have a conversation. And so I think that's like a little bit overrated.
Okay. The resume of the future. What's on it and what's completely irrelevant?
Where you learned from, completely irrelevant. What you've done, literally the holy grail. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that, even now.
If you had to invest $1 million today,
Yeah.
but not a traditional founder, where would it go?
Man, so for the million, I put half of it in Bitcoin first and foremost, I think.
We didn't even get into crypto.
Yeah. I think my thought process there is just, our fiscal policy. It doesn't matter which party is in office.
Yeah.
Like we just have way more money to print.
Yeah.
And the more money we have to print, the more obvious of an investment Bitcoin becomes. Like literally every day. And like I'm not even looking at the price. That's just like first principle. I think other areas that I would be really interested in, I'd allocate a large percentage into both Coinbase and to Robinhood. I think there are two secular trends that make both of those companies great long-term bets. One, I mean, crypto is already, proving for a large demographic, maybe a younger demographic that doesn't have as much capital yet to be preferred, over stocks, as an investment, space. But also like people just like, as cost of living's gone up, people's like financial nihilism is like actually insane. And so the rate at which people are gambling right now is like actually scary. And I actually just like read a report that talked about like the consumer investing apps, and the ones that do the best aren't the ones that provide the most information. They're the ones that provide, the most entertaining interface because you're basically gaming and gambling.
Because everything is attention based, going back to everything that we talked about with kids and just adults and how we absorb information these days.
And so I think, those two, just in terms of like traditional equities, I think have a ton of upside. And then, I think for that like last like allocation, let's say we put, 25% across, Coinbase, so we got 25%
Yeah.
left. Of that 25% left, I put half into Solana. I mean, I think, folks, were really big on Ethereum, during kind of the NFT craze. Solana has very much, replaced Ethereum, as the chain for transactions.
Yeah.
I mean, Solana has more transactions on chain now than Bitcoin does.
What's your take on XRP?
Um, oh,
Maybe not
man.
for this
So
podcast.
I'm
Maybe
gonna
for
tell you,
lunch.
I'm not technical, but
Okay.
we talked about a lot of my friends in
Yeah.
Web3, and I don't think that people are gonna love this one. But my friends who are like building like the really big companies in Web3, they're like XRP is like the coin that like your Uber driver is gonna tell you to go
Yeah.
get. And so that's like their kind of take. I don't really have the
Sure.
technical to say. Um,
Sorry to digress. What's the last 25%?
yeah.
Solana half. And
Yeah.
then?
And so also I'll say part of the reason why I think Solana half, it goes back to our AI conversation, right?
Mhm.
We talk about all these agents doing all this work,
Yeah.
right? At some point, the agents are going to begin transacting with each other. Are they going to be sending each other US dollars? Definitely not.
No.
And so I'm not saying that they're going to be sending each other Solana. But I do think that it will be a Web3 based solution, and it will be a Web3 based solution that is optimized for high transaction volume, which I think Solana has.
Yeah.
And I think for that like last like 12.5%, I'd go just some like really high upside things.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with staking in crypto?
Yeah, of course.
I'd put like 12.5% in Jito, which is like the largest staking platform on Solana. And then I put 12.5 in a company called Drift that's really allowing people to basically trade options and predict price,
Okay.
of long-term crypto. And I think those are or long-term prices of cryptocurrencies. And I think those two companies, and I will disclose that I do know the founders of both of those companies, but I think that those two companies provide a really high level of upside because they're on a chain that's still, earlier in its adoption process.
Mm-hmm.
But
they're
also
solving real problems.
Exactly.
Which has always been the problem with Web3.
Exactly.
And now finally coming in. All right,
Yeah.
last statement. In the future, the most successful entrepreneur is going to be one that looks like.
One that looks like the problem they're solving. And I don't think that's really going to ever change, The tools that make it easier for people to go do that, may change. But like the people who are going to win are always going to be the people who have like a really deep insight on a problem. Like they know it because they've been in it or they've experienced it. And they're able to build a unique solution because they understand it deeper than anyone else does.
Love that. I love that. Where can people find you, especially for your boot camp? And if they want to apply to your cohort,
Yeah.
where do they go?
Yeah. www.bootupstudios.ai. You can find everything there, the agent, the accelerator. And then on social, we're bootupstudios.ai across every platform. And we'll be sharing just more and more, content. And I think one of the things that you and I talked about was just, building in public.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one tip for founders on that is, you already decided to go start a company. Like you clearly aren't afraid of like falling on your face. So you might as well just tell the world what you're doing every day,
Yeah.
That's how you build an audience. That's how you build a following. That's how you get feedback before you make wrong decisions.
Yeah.
And so, we'll definitely be sharing more content of the journey as well.
Amazing. Listen, Chandler, thank you so much for coming all the way from Miami to be on my pod. That meant a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to have a deeper discussion on like the future of AI and entrepreneurship, what EdTech looks like with AI and education. I think we hit some really core points there. Like everything is changing.
Yeah, I know. And the thing I'll say for folks is when everything is changing, that's not the time to be afraid. That's the time to be excited because that's when there's the most opportunity.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the AI CEO podcast. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you next week. That's a wrap for this episode of the AI CEO podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. It helps me reach more leaders like you and continue bringing in top AI-first founders, industry experts, and visionary CEOs to share their insights. AI is evolving fast, and the CEOs who harness it today will lead tomorrow. Stay ahead of the curve, keep learning, and keep building. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.